الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, we'll continue our lecture on Imam Abu Hanifa and his life, rahimahullah. We spoke a little bit about Imam Abu Hanifa being known for being the founder, or one of the founders for Madhab al-Ra'i, meaning the school of thought where logic and qiyas is used to deduce things. And we explained the reason behind it. Some of the scholars have highlighted the time that Imam Abu Hanifa lived in, or during that time there was a lot of fake hadith being circulated. People were making up hadith, and it was difficult to tell the authentic from the weak hadith. Not only that, the distance from Makkah and Medina, Imam Abu Hanifa living in Iraq, there was a distance, so the hadith at that time, it had not really been codified or gathered together in the way that we have it today, along with many other different reasons that some of the scholars have given. It led to Imam Abu Hanifa having to rely on being able to use this qiyas, this deduction, the logic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed this great Imam with great intellect. And it's very easy to sometimes think of someone with a great mind that they think that they are superior to others. What's that stereotype? That if a person thinks that they are the most clever person in the room, then they look down on the rest of the people. Whereas Imam Abu Hanifa, he was the complete opposite. Not only did he have a lot of knowledge, but that knowledge, it caused him to be humble. It caused him to be humble around people. And there are many such stories that shed light on how humble this great Imam was when he would sit with his students. One such story is where Imam Abu Hanifa, he's sitting with his students and they're going through fiqh, and he's explaining, and a visitor comes, a person from elsewhere who himself is a scholar. And he sits in the back of the halaqah, of the gathering, and he sees Imam Abu Hanifa teaching the students, and he sees the students telling Imam Abu Hanifa, "Akhtat, you made a mistake," correcting the Imam and saying, "This is how it should be," and so on. And Imam Abu Hanifa accepting that from them, and not using his authority as a teacher, putting the students down and telling them, "Do you know who you're speaking to?" and so forth. And this other Imam, this other scholar who happened to be present, he was shocked and he was amazed. And Imam Abu Hanifa, he highlighted to this visiting man, telling him that this is the way that we interact, the teachers and the students. That sometimes I am right and sometimes they are right. There is no monopoly on being right. There is no monopoly on knowledge. I learn from my students, and my students, they learn from me. And again, it shows how humble this great Imam was. But he wasn't only humble when it came to knowledge itself. He was humble when he dealt with people who showed animosity anger towards him. There are many such stories. There's one story where a man confronted Imam Abu Hanifa out of the blue. The Imam was sitting down, minding his own business, when a man came to him and he said, Ya Zindiq. And Zindiq is a word that people used to use back in the day, basically meaning a hypocrite or a kafir, someone who is a heretic, someone that has left the religion. And it's not something that is permissible to use towards any Muslim, let alone a scholar in the religion. So you can quickly tell that this man, he lacks manners whatsoever. He does not have any form of manners. So he speaks to the Imam in this way. If it was any one of us, we would get angry and we would use our titles. I am the Imam of the Masjid, I am this, I am that, how dare you call me this bad word. But Imam Abu Hanifa, being who he was, he said, I am not a Zindiq. And the man, he insisted, he said, no, by Allah you are. And yet the Imam kept calm. And he said to the man, Oh Allah, if what this man is saying is true, that I have committed heresy, I've become a heretic, then forgive me for my sin. And if what the man is saying is not true, then, oh Allah, forgive the man for his foolish statement. And again, this highlights and shows us the way that knowledge should have an impact on a person. Knowledge is not just about knowing or being able to repeat statements or to recite the Quran in a beautiful voice. Knowledge, true knowledge, it is shown in the action of the person. Especially when you have everything against you. When you are completely alone. There is no one else to see your actions. That is when your knowledge takes effect. When someone comes and they push all your buttons, every single thing, they get underneath your skin, and you only see red, that is when knowledge brings you back. And you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question you. And this intellect that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was blessed with, he used it time and time again. Not just to deduce, to come up with the understanding of the hadith and the Quran and so on, but also in the way that he would deal with people. And this Imam, he lived at a time when there was a great fitna. A lot of new sects were coming up, people who were branching off from the path of the Muslims, the Sunnah, following the Quran and the Sunnah upon the understanding of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So during one such encounter, Imam Abu Hanifa, he was praying janazah. This is a well-known story. There were two janazahs that were brought to his masjid. And after praying the janazah, two men from the Khawarij, the people who, it's a branch of Islam that one thing that they're very known for is that they do takfir, they remove a person from Islam based upon major sins. This is one of their trademarks. Along with killing a lot of Muslims, claiming that these Muslims have become non-Muslims. So ala kulli hal, these two men, they come up to this great Imam and they take their swords out of the sheath and they hold it on top of the Imam and they say, we're going to ask you 2 questions. If you don't answer the questions in the way that we want you to answer, we will cut your head off. Right now, here at this very spot. And Imam Abu Hanifa, he looks up to them and he says, well, just put your swords away, let me at least give you my response. And he says, ask the questions. So the man says, the first question, do you know that this, one of these 2 janazas, it's a woman, and this woman, she was وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ الزَّانِيَةِ. She committed the evil act of zina. Not only that, but the child that is still in her womb, it is a product of that evil sin. And you pray janazah on her, even though she committed this evil act. And the Imam said, what is your second question? They said, as for the other janazah, it was a young man who used to drink alcohol. And he was known. It was not some secret, people knew about this. So you're praying, how can you pray janazah on someone who has committed zina and another person that has that used to drink alcohol? And this is where the Imam's great intellect was put on display. Instead of starting arguing with them and using verses and hadith and so on, the Imam, he played a trick. And he said, are you saying that we pray janazah on someone that was Jewish, Yehudi? And the men, they say, no. Are you saying that we pray janazah on someone that is Christian? And the men, they say, no. So who did we pray janazah on? And the men, they get angry. They say, you prayed on these Muslims. And then the Imam, he said, that is all that I needed to hear. You yourselves are admitting that these people are Muslims. And with that simple way of using logic, the story goes that these men, they made tawbah from the things that they follow in this sect, and they understood that the Imam Abu Hanifa, he was someone that had used his knowledge, had used his understanding, and the story ends there. Imam Abu Hanifa, he went through a lot of hardship in his life. A lot of hardship. And this is a recurring theme that we will see throughout the stories of these great Imams, that they were punished. Imam Abu Hanifa, it is mentioned that he was whipped more than 150 times. And his students, they said, we can still see the marks on his back. We can still see the marks on his back because of the punishment that was dealt out. Yet even though this great Imam went through so much hardship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him and preserved his legacy after him. Until today, the Hanafi madhab, it is the biggest madhab in terms of following. That if you look throughout the Muslim world, there is no madhab that is followed to such an extent as the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa. And you might think, okay, so what? The Imam Abu Hanifa, he was the first Imam. Naturally, it's going to be bigger than the other Imams that came after. But what makes it so amazing is that the scholars all agree that Imam Abu Hanifa did not write any books. There is no book that is left behind until this day that Imam Abu Hanifa himself wrote. Yes, there might be books that are attributed to him, but it is only because his students that were there, that were present with him, they would write down his opinions and his statements. And even then, Imam Abu Hanifa, he did not like that. And he would often tell his students, don't write down my opinion, leave my opinion out of it. So for a person to leave behind such a great legacy without having written down a single book, that shows that this person has sincerity, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them in their knowledge. And sometimes when you look at this, the life of other scholars, like Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he died at the young age of 45, as some scholars they say, and yet he wrote so many books. He wrote and he wrote volume after volume. So you see the different approach amongst the scholars themselves. It doesn't mean that you are any less of a scholar if you don't have any book in your name. Today, people they say, oh, you are a nobody unless you publish. Right? Not just in Islamic knowledge, but in any academic field. They say, oh, what are your publications? Right? What have you published? But the point is that at the end of the day, what matters is this ikhlas, this sincerity. If you have it and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with it, then people will see the traces of that sincerity, whether it is during your lifetime or it is after you pass away. And this sincerity, it has a huge impact, not only for scholars. Not everyone will be a scholar and not everyone needs to be a scholar. But if you are sincere in the capacity that you are able, with your family, with your friends, with your community, and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, you will see that those blessings come to you in the same way that they came to Imam Abu Hanifa and other scholars. On a final note, Imam Abu Hanifa, he passed away. Some scholars they give different numbers. They say year 250, others they dispute that number. But many of the scholars they say that the day Imam Abu Hanifa passed away was the day that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was born. The day Imam Abu Hanifa passed away was the day that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was born. And some scholars they've looked into this and they've come with their own ideas or interpretations, and obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But it is some sort of a reminder for us that this religion will always be preserved. It is not in need of individuals. Yesterday it was Imam Abu Hanifa. Once Imam Abu Hanifa was taken out of the picture and he passed away and he died, Imam al-Shafi'i comes along. And there's always people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always make people serve this religion. And this is an important concept for us to understand. The khair, the good that is happening, it is not because of what we do, but it is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the permission and the ability. And this is why if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected you to serve this religion in whatever capacity you can, you take it as sharaf, as an honor. And you say, Alhamdulillah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilized me to serve this religion. You never ever let it go to your head and you think to yourself, well, if it wasn't for me, there would be no Islam in Victoria. If it wasn't for me, then this community would be lost. If it wasn't for me, if it wasn't for me. if it wasn't for my knowledge, if it wasn't for my donations, if it wasn't for my sacrifice and so on. This is the way that the shaitan thinks, and it's the way that shaitan uses to trick people. Instead of you receiving a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that will be for nothing. All of that will be for nothing. So inshallah we will conclude here. Alhamdulillah, we've reached the end of the short, brief look into the life of one of the great scholars in Islam, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And inshallah we will continue next week in this series, and we'll look into the life of Imam Malik rahimahullah and his encounters and pursuit of knowledge and implementing that knowledge that he had.